Paul, as we were talking a little bit about soul-based economics,
Yeah.
I know that you know quite a bit about that, and since there is a revolution that's occurring on this planet right now, if you could just take a couple of minutes to tell us and the people out there what you know about that, I think it would be helpful for people to understand that there are some options and there also are some alternatives to the way that things are done now. So this is one option and alternative that I think other people need to hear about.
Okay. I came up with the name soul-based economics because I realized for anyone who's been on a spiritual path or someone who's careful about their own personality and psychological development, there sometimes comes a point where a person stops doing what our culture, unfortunately, encourages us to do, which is simply to identify as an ego, which means the part of ourselves that's rational and that can handle the three-dimensional world and get from point A to point B. But what happens instead in personal development is someone expands, they can still use all those abilities of intellect, but they concentrate also on paying attention to their intuition. They arrive at a point, and it's very much a feeling point, it's not a question of concepts, where their selfhood feels expanded. So that what is occurring in somebody else's life is not totally distant from us. The other person is not 100% isolated from us. Our feeling level is such that we are hurt when somebody else is hurt. We are concerned. And together with the input of the intuition, our way of making decisions and our way of navigating through life changes. And I realized, well, that would change somebody's economic behavior too. If someone were, for the early part of their life, planning a career so that they could make the most money possible, and the way that they felt good about themselves as a success was to always have more than somebody else, make sure that if something went out of fashion, whether it's clothes or car or even a way of speech, that they weren't left out of fashion. In other words, they were measuring their sense of value and worth by externals and by changeable things. If one is enlarged and connected to others and paying attention to intuition, another phrase for that, often used in various traditions, is that one is guided by the soul. And even if we don't have to use the word soul, the kind of economic behavior that comes out of something like that is they can't just anymore justify and leave themselves comfortable that if, for instance, they're in sales and they make a good deal by manipulating and misinforming the customer, that they're successful because they made more money. What they're aware of is that they misinformed the customer, they did something that's unethical, and it becomes impossible for them to do that. You see this spontaneously with people who've had near-death experiences. Not all of them, but if they've had a long time when their brain and their heart were not working, so medically they were really clinically dead, when they come back, even if they've been very successful in a competitive enterprise, they usually give it up. If they were good negotiators and prosecutors, let's say, or litigators in law court, where the idea is to win the case, sometimes regardless of whether justice is being served, they don't have the internal wiring anymore to take advantage of others that way. Because during a near-death experience, one expands beyond the ego. You could say one gets connected to the soul. Even if you don't call it a soul thing, it's a different level of energy, and one is no longer so separated from the others that one affects. So an economics that would be based on this would be an economics that comes more from the heart, where people are not encouraged to exploit each other, where the notion is there can be mutual benefit. There's many things in economic transactions where there can be mutual benefit. It doesn't have to be exploitation. But also how your company's policies affect the community around you, even if it's not something where the community could stop you from what you're doing, you would be more concerned to be doing good in all directions rather than being good in one direction, like for your own profits or your stockholders, at the cost of doing bad or injustice for others. The whole notion of a dog-eat-dog jungle economy goes by the wayside when somebody is motivated from that point of view.
And it also goes with the emotional intelligence research that the higher up people go in organizations with power and structure, that the less likely they are to be emotionally intelligent, which means that their ability to actually feel, from an empathy standpoint, what it is that they're doing to other people is it's not there, actually. So the higher up that people go in organizations, the less likely they are to be able to feel. And it actually goes with money as well. So the more money that someone has, the less likely they are to be emotionally intelligent, the less likely they are to actually feel for the other people that are around them. So I think it seems like we're moving from a primitive-based economy to one that's more, what would you say?
Humane, basically, in the most profound sense of the word, and more ethical. And what I wanted to do as a scientist was see, well, this is a nice idea, drawn mostly from a sense of interpersonal development. Are there already examples where companies and individuals and even government policies are operating, even if in a micro area, rather than the whole nation or the whole economy, but are these values that come spontaneously and naturally with spiritual development, are they already being applied maybe simply as a code that somebody felt would please them more to see themselves acting in the economy? And indeed, there's an interesting book by a business professor at Bentley University in Waltham, Massachusetts, called Firms of Endearment. Now, he's making a pun on the film Terms of Endearment, but he has found many companies, some of which are very well known, like IKEA and Whole Foods Market, and well, there's about 28 companies there who work from what he calls a more heart-centered approach, where, again, from a businessman's point of view, all the stakeholders, that means not just the shareholders of the stock, not just the investors, and not just the customers, but also the employees and the suppliers and this community that's directly impacted by the company, are all taken into account. Their welfare is tried to be optimized rather than just maximizing the profit gains from the company. And these companies, much to the researcher's surprise, are profitable. It's not as though they have to sacrifice the money side, the income side, in order to take care of their impact on all the other stakeholders. So it's a model that is not just conceptual, it's one that seems to work very well. And then there's different countries where different government policies also take these values into account and implement them successfully.
So switch gears a little bit, since we're at the Occupy event, since everything is live and everything moves fast, as we can see over here today.
Should we turn the camera and show people?
Sure, we'll show people where we are right now. So we've got our beautiful employees that are walking in, and then you've got the Occupy Boston event over here.
You'll see on the ground there, above the green lawn is the blue tarp lawns and tents, and then some signs holders.
There's an eclectic group of people. You've got neuroscientists here. You've got Iraq veterans. You have bankers that are walking by. You have mothers. You have school teachers. You have
peaceniks. You've got, you already said veterans, organic farmers, followers of Gandhi, socialists, capitalists. It's very encouragingly an open tent, and people feel welcome and unthreatened.
Now, what do you see as, I know that you're interested in helping this group in particular, so what do you see as something that you can bring to this movement, because you have past experience and past knowledge in things that are similar? Can you talk about your past, but also talk about what you see as maybe being an entry point that might be needed in these Occupy groups that are around the globe right now? Yeah,
well, in my past I was involved both with the anti-war movement in the 1960s, and I was fortunate then because I was getting a degree in political science as a graduate student. I went over to Czechoslovakia in 1968 when they were trying to humanize their economy and their politics, bring democracy back to them, even though they were caught under the Soviet yoke as a satellite of the Soviet Union. And remarkably, they were very successful in democratizing the country. They earned full freedom of speech. It became a crime for the Communist Party to censor anything. And it was so nonviolent and so successful that internally it was on the road to a very humane economy and a very vibrant culture and a nonviolent democracy, which is why the Russians decided under Brezhnev they didn't understand how a socialist country could be that way, and they didn't want it to spread.